Welcome back to Shit Creek Survivors, where we share stories of resilience, explore tools for resilience, and remind you that no matter how deep the water gets, there's always hope. Today, we are joined by Melissa Swonger, who's going to open up about her powerful journey through trauma, PTSD, and how kindness became her path to healing. Melissa is not only going to share her story, but she's also going to walk us through a practical checklist that you can use to navigate crisis, which is a step-by-step guide for those moments when life feels overwhelming and you just need a way forward. Let's dive in. Just to recap that we're talking to Melissa Swonger, who is a trauma-informed coach, author, and researcher who have lived what she teaches after a devastating Achilles injury that doctors said would leave her unable to walk again. She refused to give up. From a wheelchair to summiting mountains, I got to hear what mountain. Melissa turned her pain into purpose. She's now the founder of the Sage Hill Project, helping transform trauma into strength through nervous system regulation, narrative reframing, and aligning goals with the true self. Welcome, Melissa. So just to get us going, Melissa, if you would introduce yourself to our listeners and kind of give us a little background on yourself and how kind of life began.
Yeah, well, long before the Achilles injury, I was kind of born into trauma, epigenetic trauma, medical trauma, abuse and dysfunction with a narcissistic parent. And I was the youngest of 6 kids. And so I grew up under stress and trauma, not knowing that that was rewiring my brain for protection instead of connection. And so that made it really difficult it made all developmental milestones difficult, but nobody really realized it because our family had this facade and we were well connected in the community, or so it appeared. But behind closed doors was kind of a horror story. And so going through life really not knowing what to trust, being gaslit, being told one thing, telling the world it, and then having a pathological liar for a mom come behind you and say, none of that was true. And you're like, wait a minute. And so by the time I get to be an adult, we had grown up in the church. Every time the doors were open, my mom actually was on staff at one of the churches and my dad was an usher. And so I knew a lot about God, but I didn't know you could have a relationship with God until end of high school. And in that time, I thought I didn't really want to die, but I didn't know how to keep going. I just had kind of lost hope, but I didn't really want to die. And the Lord showed up. I can look back on my life now after soul healing transformation, that he was at all of those points along the way, whether I realized it or not at the time.
Yep.
And fast forward to several highlight moments, one of them being when I was 19, I spent a summer in Kansas City in a tag house between the Bloods and Crips. And we actually had to move to a church across the way because a tag house isn't really the safest place to be, but 3 of us, because I didn't want to be home for the summer. I thought I had kind of outstayed my welcome at all my friends' houses the summer before. And I thought doing missions and ministry would be a great way to spend my time. And I wanted to be discipled, but my life was too messy. Like church kind of judged my life to be too messy to be officially discipled or be on their staff, like as an intern. So, who didn't was these 2 guys who were friends of mine who decided just on a whim with zero guidance, zero oversight to go serve the kids in the inner city who had food insecurity when school was out, who didn't have supervision, and they needed a female to make that work. They thought, well, let's be responsible about this and have a female for the female kids. And then they were 2 guys. And so we did that because my messy life didn't matter there.
Right.
And the Lord showed up in ways. There was a girl who was 13 who lived with me and who would come and stay with me. She had a horrible story. She was basically raising 2 5-year-old twins. And I realized in that moment, she didn't want to be at her house for the summer. Guess who else was there? Because I didn't want to be at my house for the summer. And we had so much more alike than we had different, even though on paper we looked different. Like in real life, we had so much alike. And I left there with her saying, you're going to leave like everybody else the day I left. Went back to College Hill, sorority life. And I thought, my efforts mean nothing. They're a drop in the ocean.
Mhm.
So I hardened my heart and just was like, let's go get what you can. Like, I was wired to win and not trust people, only trust yourself and go get it. But there was this dichotomy because I was also wired to slay bullies and be for the underdog. And so there was just this war within me.
Mhm.
And that started the transformation. I committed career suicide at 20 when I took this coveted internship at a huge ad agency. It was put on a big pizza account for the nation. And in the boardroom with all these execs looking at me and me thinking I have it made, I stood up and said, I just realized I don't care who eats what pizza, and walked out. And I never worked in an ad agency again.
That's a good
But
walkout.
yeah, and I walked out. And then I thought, well, I went to an import-export firm and the same drive, right? We're going to try this again. We're going to try to be a badass. We're going to try to do, we don't care what dead body parts we leave along the way to the top, corporate warrior. And I
Yeah.
was on track to be the youngest CEO ever in this organization. I graduated college in 3 years, overachieving just to put my past behind me and try to outrun it.
Right.
Yeah.
But I still had that bully slaying, do the right thing, be for the underdog. So when the corporation wasn't paying the little people, this is back when you had to save things on like floppy disks, right? There wasn't like the digital saving things. I had backed everything up and went to the CEO, slammed his door and said, if you don't pay them, I'm going public. And he was like, you're on track to be the youngest CEO. What are you doing? And I'm like, well, we agreed on a mutual termination. The little guy got paid. And that was the last time I worked there. So it's like, what are you doing with your life?
Right.
And I'm only in my 20s.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward, I have my first daughter. And the day I held her, what I realized for the first time in my life was that I loved a person more than I love myself. And I didn't even know if I loved myself at that time. I didn't know what love
Right.
was really, but I love this human being more than I love myself. And I had seen 105 ways not to parent or love people. And I'd never seen one way to do it right.
Right.
So in that moment, that sacred moment, I just begged God for wisdom because I knew a whole lot about the Bible.
Mhm.
James 1:5 says, let any of you who lack wisdom ask and will be given to you generously without condemnation. And I begged him for it. And I wish I could tell you in that moment, sunshine and roses, there was a download of wisdom and my life changed. But it took a few years and a few heartbreaks and a few crises of faith. And then he largely answered that prayer through a woman named Laura Casper, who became my mentor. And I was just kind of dropped into at the feet of these spiritual giants.
That's
And
awesome.
they did soul healing ministry. It was her, and it was a group of other women, one a very seasoned therapist who became my therapist. But they would go to the war-torn regions of South Sudan and Uganda and places where horrific things are happening and bring the soul healing, soul transformation power of God to them. And nothing weird, nothing out of the just ordinary people sitting and opening a space to really sit with people and listen and intercede for them.
Mhm.
And so I was changed by that. And you would think, well, there's this huge catalyst. I'm now being reparenting my inner child through her. And she was being the grandparent to my children. And in the middle of this, and my husband went back to school. He was in his medical residency. And in the middle of all of these things, and you think life's taken a turn, the back of my Achilles was severed traumatically. And it didn't heal. It nicked an artery, nicked nerves, and all of these surgeries, it wouldn't heal. I had this, it just kept getting worse. I had a gaping wound in the back of my ankle.
Oh man.
And they were like, we need to amputate your leg. And I said, whoa, no, no. And I had PT friends and OT friends saying, you're going to do better if we just amputate your leg and put a prosthetic on it. And I said, no. They said, well, you'll never walk without assistance again.
Wow.
And
How
so,
did you sever it?
well, it was a
Yeah.
shopping cart, actually.
Oh wow.
So if you look at the shopping carts now, they have these tubular wheel chassis. They used to have sharp angle iron wheel chassis.
I remember.
And I wasn't the first accident with them that was big, but I was one of the bigger ones. And so after that point, my goal was to make sure they don't keep manufacturing that way. When I found out that they just
Right.
thought paying for the medical bills was easier than paying for all the retrofitting that would need to happen,
Right.
um, we made sure that they changed it.
Awesome.
But now I have 4 kids, a husband who is knee-deep in medical residency, and, my house wasn't ADA accessible. I was crawling through my house. I had a child, my 3rd daughter, my youngest 2 were surprised, and they're only a year apart. And I had a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old, and the 4-year-old was really sick. Turns out she has celiacs, but we didn't know that till she was 7. So she's, like, vomiting constantly. She's in pain. It was a bad deal. And she's in the hospital, and I, have this moment of just being so frustrated. I have a manual wheelchair. Why I never got an electric wheelchair, I will never know. But I had my 3 and 4-year-old, like, on my lap navigating the wheelchair. At this time, my 4-year-old was admitted and going through all kinds of hell. And I'm wired for protection, not connection. So I'm reverting during this time. I'm bitter. Life is hard, navigating life in a wheelchair and everything. I'm getting bitter. And so I hadn't been returning my mentor Laura's phone calls. I hadn't been doing anything. And she's hammer calling me, and I'm getting agitated. And so
Mhm.
I'm taking a break in the lobby with all these beautiful glass sculptures in the ceiling and just wondering how to make it through this hard moment. And she hammer calls me again. And I answer with all the venom. I'm just like, "Can't you take a hint? I don't want to talk to you." To a woman who has never once in her life deserved venom like that. And she's 6 foot tall with a crown of gray glory, and she wasn't loud, but she was a colorful presence in the world. And in her sing-song voice, she just says, "No, I don't suppose I can," and she just shows up at the hospital, and that broke me. And after that moment, women in the church started cleaning my house, started grocery shopping, started bringing meals. There was a woman named McKay who had trauma herself, and she was a single mom who had a Habitat for Humanity house and 2 teenage daughters, and she kept bringing Sundays. She would to my family so that we would have joy on Sundays.
Mhm.
A year later, I was walking her through her cancer treatments, and she didn't get the miracle, but she brought
Mhm.
the most joy to me during that time.
Mm.
And I was wrestling with God during all of this, and what he told me to do was write my story. And I was like, the last thing I'm gonna do is write my story.
Mhm.
So I was like, that's too vulnerable. What if, and hear me out, I write like fiction stories? How about Christian fiction under a pseudonym? And did and never published it because that wasn't even what he was talking about. And then fast forward to 2017, I felt called to go back to school. Like, it was a dramatic moment. I was again volunteering because somebody needed a female leader with youth group. And we were at this big thing where they're also teaching the leaders. And I wasn't even officially in ministry, but I'm like, sure, let's go learn leadership in the church. And there was this moment where, and I had learned how to pray and I'd learned how to intercede. And I really was hearing God saying, hey, you need to let go of what you're holding on to so you can receive what I have for you. And I
Mhm.
was like, whoa. Okay. And me assuming to know what God's saying is like, let's let go of the distractions so we can receive and minister to the kids. And the leader of the whole thing interrupts worship, takes the microphone, and goes, I really feel like God's saying to somebody right now, you need to let go of what you're holding on to so you can receive what God has for you. And like a lightning bolt to my head, he says, you're going back to school. And I'm like, you mean like in 7 years when my youngest graduates? Like, now's not really a good time. And, nevertheless, I started crying. I couldn't stop crying till I told somebody, because that's
Mhm.
how God, like, he's gonna hold me accountable. And, I went back to seminary. I didn't even know what seminaries existed in the world.
Mhm.
Turns out a lot of them don't want women. That's unfortunate.
Oh.
But one of them, Gordon Conwell, who, Billy Graham actually pulled together in 1969, has always graduated women. It's an interdenominational seminary. So they agree on the basics, but, like, everybody's gotta wrestle for the gray areas, right? What you have to know
Right.
why you believe what you believe, because there's a lot of different denominations represented who have their own specific tenets. And,
Right.
that was probably the best thing I ever did. A guy named Rodney Cooper was my advisor there, and, he used to be the director of Promise Keepers, just as a side note. And
Okay.
I just met him first off, and in seminary, you're supposed to kind of fillet your life open with everybody, and I'm like, privately message him, like, how much are we supposed to share? Like,
Yeah.
like, is there a limit? Or like, because the timeline of my life is like an erratic EKG. And he's like, why don't you tell me what you're talking about? And I did. And he's like, yours is a story that has to be told. And I was like, oh, yeah, no, maybe I'll just like teach for God and throw some of my anecdotes in. Fast forward, I did get my master's in seminary. I did a year of, in COVID, I did a year of evidence-based coaching at Fielding because I wanted to create spaces for other people to transform and be able to share their stories in the way I had and heal and introduce them to like how to walk with God through this, even when you don't trust Him or yourself, and kind of navigate those spaces and help them be successful in outcomes. And didn't stop there, went on to get my PhD and PhD candidate at Adler in psychology. And so going through all of these transformation things, I'm almost done. And my niece, who's only 15 years younger than me, and I helped raise her. We've always been close, suffering through a lot of trauma together. Last year, her youngest was diagnosed at 18 months with metabolic disorder that's terminal, Sandhoff, and they don't live to be 3, and he was 18 months. So I had put my life on hold, like nothing else mattered, and I moved in with them to love on her and her family and rock this died baby. That was horrific. We went through that, and I stayed 6 weeks after he passed, and they were trying to start moving on with their life, go back to work. I thought, well, I'm going to move back home. It seemed right. And on the 4.5-hour drive back, the psychologist within me thought I had done all the right things to make the good shifts. I went from summiting mountains to only being in a rocking chair. I went to eating healthy to door dashing every night, what other people had yet, so there was some positive shifts that I was going to start to finish my dissertation. So I pull into my garage, and before I can even get in the house, I fall through a trapdoor. Not figuratively, literally. So in Oklahoma, we have these tornado shelters built into the ground floor.
Okay.
And in my entire tenure in the house, it's never been unlocked because we're from the Midwest. We don't go in the storm shelters. We just have them.
Right.
And it had been unlocked and not relocked while I was there. And my left foot, which was my good leg, took one step and it started sliding forward. There's nothing to grab onto. And I fell all the way down into 4 splits, landed in a concrete and metal tomb. Broke my back in 2 places. Avulsion fracture in my pelvis, tore the hamstrings in my left leg, my good leg. And what in the world, Lord? And so I can't really use crutches because of my broken back. Can't really walk because of my hamstrings being completely torn. So what can I do? And so I just laid there and said, okay, Lord, you have my undivided attention. What do you want me to do? And he said, I want you to write your story. And I said, absolutely. Lightning doesn't usually strike twice in the same place. I don't want to strike 3 times. So I did. As soon as I could be at an incline at all, they set my computer up for me, and I wrote my story called Whom He Raised, which is a book that's coming out February 22nd. That Whom He Raised is from my life verse, which is John 12:9b. And they came not only to see Jesus, but Melissa, whom He raised from the dead. And the story is just about my journey of all the things, because I have PTSD, a lot of traumatic events, and just seeing joy in life. And that there's so many reasons, and so many times I'm tempted to sit in the grave, wrapped in the grave clothes that become like a security blanket.
Yeah.
He's called me forth, and I can be a witness. And so how do we navigate life that doesn't feel safe while also contributing and connecting instead of just protecting?
Absolutely.
Very well said.
That really got me thinking about the idea of surviving compared to living,
Mhm.
because I think that is a natural response, especially if something happens to you when you're young. You
Yeah.
just want to blend in, not look like you're on the out. So you're more concerned about blending in and not being picked out as the person on the fringe, and that's where you stay because that's where you
Yeah.
think you're safe. Wow, really well said. Wow. All right. Well, it sounds like you have quite a shit creek story. You know what I mean? So you're definitely in the right place. And what I'd love to hear about is what you were able to do after it looks like the book, when you created this sheet of kindness in crisis, quick actions to be kind to yourself and others, because you've actually graduated to a guideline for somebody, and that's amazing. That's
Mhm.
such a great tool. Can you explain why you thought of that tool for someone, either yourself or someone else that you thought might need it, and how that got rolling?
Yeah. Well, it didn't really start as a formal checklist, as most things don't. It's just this momentum that gets going. And what it really was the idea of radical kindness.
Uh,
So, my transformation happened because of people's radical kindness to me. And there's
mm,
actually a blueprint for transformation, especially for those of us who are wired for protection instead of connection. And I think that blueprint is found in two places. One, Romans 2. 1 through 4. Romans 2, 1 through 4. The first three, it's very interesting to me because I love this part. Paul is telling people, don't judge. Bottom line of those three verses is the judgment seat's locked up. Nobody's ever taking resumes. You don't qualify. So rip that up. All right. Because we tend to do that consciously and unconsciously, judging ourselves and others out
Hmm.
of or into situations, right? Based on our past or based
Yeah.
on what we see or based on what we see in the mirror, based on what we see when we look at other people. And like I said, when I spent that summer in the inner city, the emotional honesty was you could say whatever you wanted to about this 13 and 19-year-old, but the emotional honesty was we had a lot alike.
Right.
And so just giving up judging. And so if we're not supposed to judge, what we know about psychology is if you only tell your brain what not to do, don't think about an elephant. You're going to think about an elephant. So we
Right.
have to do more than just say what not to do. We have to see what to do. Okay, well, then the next verse, Romans 2:4 says, or do you not know that it's his kindness, restraint, and patience that leads to repentance? Repentance is just a change of heart or mind, a transformation.
mhm,
Right.
So what leads to that? Kindness, patience, restraint. Well, restraint is power. There's no restraint needed if there's no power. So
Mm.
we have power to influence ourselves and others through our thoughts and behaviors, right? So there's no need for restraint if there's no power. So
Right.
exercising restraint and making a choice to be kind and patient. Well, where else do we see that, right? So the other thing that I believe is the other part of the blueprint. Jesus said when approached by the religious scholar in Mark 12:30 and to 31, he quotes the Shema, which is from Deuteronomy 6:4. It's still integral part of Jewish faith. Uh, and that is love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. That's the number one thing, right? So it's this
Yeah.
epic love triangle. And then in our English translation, we get it a little twisted because, and love others as yourself. And so we think we always have to put others first. But if
Hmm.
you read it, it's love others as yourself. There's no loving others if you haven't learned to love yourself. So
Uh,
love and knowing God first, and then learning to love ourselves well, who he created us to be in a godly love, not an egotistical love, not a self-centered love, but he created us with a purpose for a time such as this, uniquely qualified with personality traits, spiritual gifts, all of that, getting to know yourself and the positive traits, not
mm.
dwelling on the negative. Out of the overflow of that, we're better able to love other people in ways that point back to God.
Wow.
And so when you put that together with Romans 2, 4, kindness, restraint, patience, leading to repentance. Well, God is love, and that's from 1 John. And Jesus said, my disciples will be known by their love. And you go to 1 Corinthians 13 that says, love is patient, love is
Mm.
kind.
mhm.
right? Love doesn't boast. So
Yeah.
you get the whole things, right? And so I think we have a blueprint. Well, how does that translate to a checklist, a quick checklist, right? So it's a lot of explanation for this really quick checklist. But we don't know naturally how to sit with people or ourselves in crisis.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're experiencing trauma, whether it is reliving trauma, ruminating on past trauma, or whether we're catastrophizing in the future, or whether something's actively happening in the moment that's horrific, people tend to want to avoid it because our brains, our hippocampus, are not wired to be able to process negativity, right? We want to remove that out in order to give it a permanent home. And when we don't take time to process that, then our hippocampus holds on to it and keeps, when you're triggered, it keeps bringing up, hey, you want to process this now? Every time you say no, it just files it back and it's going to come back. And
Yeah.
so what can we do in the moment that equips us to not avert our glaze because of cognitive dissonance when seeing somebody go through trauma? Because they don't know what to do. So they're like, I don't know what to do. I don't want to make it worse. Let's just not do anything. Well, overcoming apathy, if you're a person who can walk alongside someone with trauma, but also the duality of being kind to ourselves because we beat ourselves up more than other people a lot of the time.
Yeah, we do.
Oh, yeah.
And so just that quick checklist of 6 things on how to kind of restore hope, repair and reflect. Sometimes just it's your presence, right? That helps. Like, so it talks about being able to sit and the words aren't important. Like we think we're going to fix it with words or I don't know what to say. And you're like, well, you don't have to. It's your presence.
The
So there's
ministry of
women that
presence.
showed up at my house and were doing things without me asking. I was never going to ask for their help. Never. That's a trauma response. I know, but I was never going to ask for help. So when they just show up to fulfill the needs, like that's kind of how the checklist got started because it's like, well, what did I need for myself and others? And then when people ask me, I kept saying kind of these things in a nutshell. So I was like, why not just make a list to share?
Yeah. Yeah, it's super important. And I'm definitely going to attach it to the episode so everyone out there can listen to it. But it starts with number 1, pause before you react. Number 2 is anchoring compassion, not control. Number 3 is name, normalize, and nurture. Number 4 is regulate before you relate. And then 5 is reflect and repair. And then 6 is return to hope. I think this is going to be such a powerful tool, even for me, to know that there's something to reference. Because a lot of times we try to talk about stuff like what to do in the moment. And we've also talked about tools like how to ground yourself and, using your senses, which you speak to in a couple of these. But yeah, having a list, because for someone who's had PTSD, who someone stands next to and says, you just got to find your new normal. Sometimes that is a crazy answer. You're like, what do you mean? I don't want a new normal. I just want to be me, So it almost feels like when people are trying to help you, it almost feels like they're pecking at you, but they're not. So as a control freak, having this list in my back pocket that I have accepted as like my rules almost of engagement, and that when something happens, boom, here's the first step in moving forward. I think that's super cool. I think something else you said that is super relatable to me is that, we're harder on ourselves than we are on anyone else. And we have to learn how to love ourselves. And one of the ways I've had to do that, whether things are going good or whether things are things are going in a way I don't understand, I've had to keep reminding myself, thy will be done. But at some point, a light bulb went off in me. It's like, how am I asking God for his will to be done in my life and not recognizing that everyone else that I'm critiquing in this world and the way they're living, God is working in their life too. And I am literally critiquing when I'm getting angry at people about how they drive, how they talk, what they look like, almost in a survival mode, because you're always looking for the threat, if you will. And you create threats as it's happening because you're so used to basically creating scenarios. If this happens, this is what I'm going to do. If this happens, this is what I'm going to do, which is a control thing, which is like a survival thing. It's like, man, that was so well. You definitely cracked open my brain a little bit on that one.
I know. I'm over here like speechless about it. I really am. It felt like you were talking to me, right? Answering questions that I didn't even realize I was trying to ask. And being able to remember what you say and then put it towards that checklist that you just explained so well as also. Like Cam says, I think it's going to be a tool I can put in my back pocket, and I can refer to it whenever I need to as well. So yeah, I don't know what else to say. I will say this. One thing I thought about while you guys were talking was we have to remember sometimes God's plan is we think it's going to be 2 + 2 = 4, but it could be 3 + 1. It could be 6 - 1. There's a lot of ways, or 6 - 2. There's a lot of ways to get to 4. So you have to be open to the idea that it's not going to happen the way you perceive it. It's going to happen the way He wants it.
Which is hard for people who want to be in control.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When you're wired for protection instead of connection, control is key. And surrendering that, you have to learn to trust God, because He's not a man that He should lie. And so when we try to put human attributes to a boundless God, that gets us into trouble.
Yeah.
Oh, very well said there too.
Yeah, definitely. And pride and ego can get in there too. You know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah,
basically, because
that's what the judging is.
It's the sin that leads to all the other sins, because pride not only like makes you at sometimes when you think things are going well, oh, I'm doing good, because you're looking over the fence. But on the other side of that coin is when things are going well for somebody else, you become a victim because your pride's telling you that you deserve something that they have and you don't have it now. Why is this happening? I'm a victim. This isn't fair. And you start critiquing the story, and then yeah, it's just so funny the way that God works. And yeah,
You're
it's so
reminding
funny.
me of that, of a trauma. Well, it's really codependency triangle, but a lot of people who've been through trauma develop codependent tendencies, because I'm not okay if you're not okay, especially if you had abusers growing up. It's like we have to make that person okay so we can all be okay. And there's this triangle in psychology, and you're either the perpetrator, the victim, or the martyr. And so just becoming aware, transformation has 3 building blocks: awareness, connection, and movement. And becoming aware when we take that victim mentality is, I don't have to stay on this triangle. I'm empowered to get off the cycle. And so when I start to have a victim mentality, it's not why me, it's why not me. Like this isn't heaven. This is a fallen world. People have free will. And so, not seeing everything as an attack. Some of it's just living.
Yeah.
And giving up the need to be the perpetrator, the martyr, or the victim. We are empowered to get off the cycle and choose a healthy path.
Wow. That's definitely thinking outside the box. That's so important. I'm so glad you said that. Man, to all our listeners out there, definitely write that down.
That was a mic drop.
This is going to be like a three-time listen episode kind of deal, because there's a lot going on here. Even you can see it in Dennis and me. I'm like, oh. Well,
I mean, it's scratching an itch you didn't even know you had, in a way. It's like you are answering questions that I wasn't even where I was asking, but it just said something to me. Right? I mean, I don't know how else to say that. I'm like speechless on this, and that's not normally me.
No, not at all. Not at all.
But in the best way.
And it's so easy when things aren't going well in our lives to feel like a victim, to feel like we're being crushed. We look up at God, why? And usually it's because things aren't going according to our plan. And, I've learned that sometimes, actually almost all the time, God's plan is better than what you ever thought you could put together. But a lot of the times, before you can become that person, unfortunately, you have to be crushed into something that can be rebuilt. But we think that's like a penalty, when it's actually, we've kind of been chosen. It's almost like an honor, especially when you get out of it and you look back at it. What's even weirder now is I thank God for my story. Like, I thank God that I get to, that I was able to get through that, and that it was, I don't know. And I grew up with a dad in the DEA who was captured overseas and held, and I thought he was such a hero and all that kind of stuff. Little did I know, when I was praying, I want to be just like my dad. That means you got to go through what dad went through. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Go through the trauma and all that kind of stuff to come out on the other end.
Careful what you ask for.
Exactly. But at the same time, it's like when you get to the point where you've become another person, you know what I mean? Like, you've become a totally different person, mentally, even physically. Every cell in your body has been reborn. Like it's crazy when you look back and look. What you were saying earlier is like, it only makes sense looking back. Hindsight is 2020 when you're like, that's an incredible story. But when you're actually walking through the valley of the shadow of death, or if you're on fire in that period, it is hard to entertain the thought like, this is going to change me into somebody great. You know,
Right.
it's just like, stop the pain, please. Like, stop. Why me? Why me? Why me? And then you get all the way through it and you're like, I couldn't have been the person I am now without going through that. And when I was asking, why am I the only one going through this when everyone else isn't? It was that I'm actually, in a way, special. Like, I'm actually, in a way, like going through something, ask and you shall receive, and you're going through it. I think that's really, really neat. And the whole, the what is it? The prayer footsteps in the sand doesn't make sense until you actually go through it. And you're like,
Oh, you have to be carried.
oh, yeah,
Yeah.
you have to be carried. I mean, because you are incapacitated. I mean, we're not talking about having a bad day. Like, we're talking about like you crawling around your house, like trying to figure out how you're going to handle all this. What am I going to do now? What am I meant for? And then just leaning in and trusting God. And it takes a long time too. Again, you can speak to that. It's not a light bulb. It's not a switch. It's like a kind of indication. Write
Yeah.
your story. And you're like, nah, no, that doesn't make sense. I'm not going to write my story.
Yeah. You got me through all of this, but that probably no.
You go into like negotiating. You're like, I'll do this, but maybe not that, and then you do this. And then a year later, he's like, are you done with that? All right, let's,
He's so patient.
I
And
know.
I'm gaining ground here. And he's like, it's right back where we were. Yeah.
It's
right
the
back where we
classic dad watching the kids, like the kids are just like, I want this now. I want this now. I want to drive. You're 12. I don't care. I want to drive, and what father would give the keys to a 12-year-old? Not many, so we got to kind of remember all that. Now, what would you say to someone out there listening who is feeling hopeless in this season? For whatever reason, they're just having trouble. Is there something you'd like to pass on?
Yeah, I just think there's a lot of times in my life where I felt that way. Me being here is a testament to God getting me through, to the poem that you're saying, him carrying me through. Because when I was going through things, there was one time in my life around the time that I had talked about when my daughter was in the hospital, one of my husband's colleagues had said, man, if it wasn't for bad luck, y'all would have no luck.
Right.
And I still remember the moment he said that, and just the feelings of hopelessness and people trying to encourage me along the way saying, you made it through 100% of the things before, like you're going to get through this. And you're like, I know I can. I don't know if I want to. Like,
Wow.
I don't know if I want to keep doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where I lived a lot. Like, I understand how strong I am, what a gift that is. And like, I do. And I don't take it for granted either. I don't mean to minimize that either. Like, I am strong. But also there are moments in my life where I've truly felt like, I know I can. I can do all things through God who gives me strength. I don't know if I want to. And being able to articulate that out loud to somebody who doesn't turn away from it, I think is key. If you're walking with somebody through something that feels hopeless, or somebody who's had a horrific last year, lost a child or whatever, and what can you say to that? You
Yeah.
just have to show up and say, I'm here. I support you. I'm glad you're here today. And tell yourself one more day. We don't have to have it all figured out, right? So
Right.
what I've committed to myself in the moments where I didn't want to go on anymore was one more day. You can always make the choice, right? But what about one more day?
Yeah.
And when you have one more day and you decide, there's moments where you're like, I don't know if I want to make it one more day. Well, what's one reason today that you can anchor to? For me, I had my kids. What's the story going to be on the other side of your behavior or action that you're going to leave behind?
Yeah.
Because somebody's going to have to deal with it. If you don't care about anybody but yourself, then that's a different story. But like, find something you can care about in this world bigger than yourself. That's part of the vertical connection, vertical inward and outward connection. The first step is the vertical connection, something bigger than yourself, wherever you are on your faith journey. For me, it's God. But wherever you are on your faith journey, connect to something bigger than yourself. You are a part of this world that is bigger than yourself.
Yeah.
Start there. You're a
Yeah.
part of this world that's bigger than yourself. Get yourself a dog or a cat, something that is going to matter. Connect to something bigger than yourself. And then the inward connection, right? What's one thing I can do to honor myself in this moment?
Yeah.
And that's being kind to ourselves, right? That goes back to radical kindness. Radical kindness to ourselves starts with us. Be kind to
Yeah.
yourself. And then the number one thing I've done actually in my lowest points in my life, and there have been several, but I tell you what, the tried and true thing is this outward connection, which starts a movement to outreach. But that's kind of the catalyst between the, when we're doing awareness, connection, and movement. The last connection is outward, and that is kind of the bridge to movement. But the last connection is outward, and lifting my eyes out of the tomb, the box, the prison I put myself in, whatever you want to call it, lifting my eyes up, right, vertical, but then to see the world outside my doorstep, connecting with that world. So there are people who need us to be kind to them. They need our service, they need our volunteering, whatever it is. Go help somebody else. And
Yeah.
if you don't feel, if that is too insurmountable for you in the moment, go be kind to yourself, get yourself a coffee. Look the barista in the eye, make eye contact with the people around you, say hello, give them your real name when you put your coffee order in, hold the door for somebody on the way out, and begin connection that way. From wherever you are, there are incremental steps to connecting vertically, inwardly, and outwardly.
Yeah.
But it takes movement. Like what's one step? When we look at the whole, it's overwhelming. What's one thing you can do in this moment to keep going?
Yeah. Wow.
Thank you.
Yeah, when you need to connect to a higher power, I've mentioned on here before, when I first got into the AA program, I was so toxic and all that kind of stuff, but I knew I couldn't do it alone. And someone literally suggested, well, from now on, this chair sitting next to you is your higher power. I'm like, why is that? Because it's making better decisions than you. And so that was like the beginning of me to kind of like offloading just a little bit. Even my therapist, when I was, struggling that first year, she's like, leave some of those pains with me. I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, there's a box in that corner. I want you to go set something in there and you can pick it up in 2 days when you come back. But from here on out, I want you to let that go. Yeah, that's funny. Then you mentioned the second thing was self-connection, and somehow animals are really good at helping with that. It's like what's the old saying, and someone's going to get mad at me for saying that, but you could lock a dog and your wife in a trunk for an hour. Which one's going to be happy to see you when you open it? It's going to be your dog. You know what I mean? Like unlimited love, and just the amount that I've cried while cuddling my dog, just like believing that he was the only thing I could trust or connect with, and this was like the end. And then you continue to grow and you continue to grow until suddenly like something. So for me, it was moving down south from St. Louis, which I think is a pretty toxic, or at least was a very toxic environment when I was leaving there. And I came down here to Atlanta and someone held the door for me and I was like, what do you want? And I soon realized that they were just holding the door for me. And just starting to reciprocate that and starting to hold the door for other people opened a door in me, because it was almost like I had control of that. I'm not doing this because I have to. I'm just doing it because I want to. This is, this is how I'm going to live today kind of deal. Man, wow. And you just nailed it all down to 3 perfect steps. So that's awesome. Thank you so much. And I'm sure our listeners are going to be able to apply that in their real life. Do you have any other spontaneous utterances you want to leave people with, or any gold nuggets, or is that enough to digest for today, you think?
That's a lot to digest. I just want to say radical kindness improves everything. Internal, it improves your family life. Like there's just science behind it. It's not a moral hack, a life hack or a moral platitude. Radical kindness is actually strength walking. And we can do a movement. We can flip the script. We can prefer unity over division. We can start it.
Yeah, absolutely. Here we go.
Here we go.
Well, Melissa, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Really appreciate all the gold nuggets and all the information. I'll be
I feel
putting
like I'm
all your
supposed to pay you for your services today, because
Yeah,
like I just had a
Thank you
personal.
so much for having me. I really appreciate this time I've had with you.
Thank you so much, and I'm glad to have grown with you. You make us better. I think selfishly we do the podcast because every person that we get to come in contact with kind of like shifts the angle just a little bit. Reveals
Mhm.
something that's in the gray that we didn't see. Even says, I get where you're coming from. To know that there's someone else out there who gets where you're coming from and not only gets it but has walked down it and figured out, okay, here's something I can do. These are things I can't do. And, you've put together the list and ways to help people. So I will be putting all your information in the bio of the episode. And until next time, guys, thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thanks for
much.
having me.
Melissa's story reminds us that even in our darkest moments, hope is never lost. It just needs faith, kindness, and a connection to be found again. If you or someone you love is struggling, don't face it alone. Reach out. There's strength in community and healing in shared stories. Thanks for joining us on Shit Creek Survivors, where we share stories of resilience, discover tools for resilience, and remind you that through it all, there's always hope. Don't forget to subscribe, share this episode with someone who needs to hear a little encouragement today, and keep paddling towards the light.